Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the webinar today. Appreciate you taking some time to attend. I'm going to probably leave the video on for a little bit. I just wanted to introduce myself and our company, Terralogic, and then we'll get into the content here shortly. So thank you so much for taking some time today with us. This is a topic that I think all of us have had to kind of learn a little bit about. I've actually been working in this space for quite a while, so hopefully we can share some insights, talk a little bit about what we've learned over the years. So let's just dive into some of it. First of all, again, welcome. Please enjoy your time today. I think from a time perspective, we're looking at somewhere around 30 to 40 minutes. We've slotted out the entire hour. We want to leave a little bit of time for questions, but I don't know that we'll use the entire hour. So somewhere around 30 to 40 minutes is what I have prepared. The audio is muted for participants, but if you do have questions, please feel free to submit those via the chat, and I'll try to pick those up near the end if we can. So that's kind of the format of this webinar format. This is my first Zoom webinar. We've done other webinars before, but I've never used Zoom before. So I'm going to apologize right now if I mess up. Now I am, like everybody else, practicing social distancing. I am working from home. So if you hear some background noise, I apologize. We tried to do the best we could to try to minimize that, but sometimes there's things that are outside of our control. So we'll see what happens there. You are going to receive a link to the recording of this webinar. So if you end up having to duck out, or if you miss something, or if you'd like to share it with friends or associates, you'll have the opportunity to do that after the webinar. All right, so who am I? My name is Paul Kushlan. I've been working in this space for quite a while. I've actually been with a company called DynaQuest since 1998. Me and my wife purchased the company in 2002, and I've been running it as president for that time period. One of the things we've done over the past 20 years is one area of expertise that we've had is helping customers enable remote work. So we've done a lot of work around technologies that enable people to be able to really work from anywhere on any device. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of those technologies today. I'm actually, if assuming time permits, do a couple demos, have some fun with it. Certifications, me and my team certified across essentially all the major product lines, Microsoft, Dell, Citrix, SonicWall, just to name a few, a bunch of other ones as well. In 2014, we actually created our own cloud desktop as a service offering. It's essentially a DaaS offering where we host applications and desktops for customers. And so we've seen recently some growth in that area because many customers don't want to really host their own hardware anymore. They don't want to own their own hardware, and they just have us manage those software applications and data for them. And so that's another area of kind of background that we have. And then in May of 2018, we joined forces with a company called Terralogic, and now we're part of a larger global IT service provider. So in addition to being able to do the traditional infrastructure activities that we've always done, we now have the capability to do application development, software development, mobile app development, design, and many, many other things. We have offices all over the world, Bangalore, India, Ho Chi Minh, Vietnam, and then all across the United States. So we really can service customers in a wide variety of ways in a wide variety of places. So that's kind of who we are. But enough about me. Let's get on to the presentation. And so I'm going to go ahead and turn off the video here, and we'll just focus on the slides here. And then I have, like I said, a few demos that I'd like to do as well. So let's get into that. First of all, what's our agenda today? Well, we're going to talk a little bit about traditional office space versus remote office. Talk about some of the differences there. Most of us with the COVID-19 pandemic have been forced to kind of find ways to work remotely. We're going to talk about some of that. We'll talk about the levels of remote work. And so we'll talk a little bit about how to be productive when you're remote. versus in the office. Then we'll get into some of the technical recommendations that I would have, and then some non-technical recommendations, and then we'll wrap it up. And like I said, hoping that this entire thing is somewhere around 30 to 40 minutes, but time will tell. All right, let's get into it. So one of the few things that has been good about social isolation is people have had a ton of time to create memes. And so this is one of my favorites. I think all of us have found ourselves washing our hands way more than we used to. I'm sure the soap industry is very happy about how this is going. But living in Utah, my hands have started to feel a little bit dry. So I thought that was a fun one. All right, let's get into it. So our work environments, we all are used to going to work every day. And I think there are some benefits to an office environment. It's a closed wall facility. There's security around being able to go to a single facility and work. You have the close association with your coworkers, and you're able to go to meetings and get things done. But there's a lot about our work environments that really aren't that great. And so if you think about it, the first thing is your workmates. I mean, if you were being told that you were going to spend 1/3 of your life with somebody, you'd probably want to have some say into who that person is and what they're like. And unfortunately, in a traditional work environment, you don't get that opportunity. Your workmates are chosen for you. Your cubicle mates and neighbors are typically not somebody you would have chosen. Now, they could be great, but they may not be. Maybe the temperature of the room is not exactly what you'd like. Maybe it's too hot, maybe it's too cold, those kinds of things. Noise, maybe your employees are loud. Maybe they play a radio. Maybe you'd like to play a radio, but you can't. So all of those things are things that are really outside of our control. Smells, shared restrooms. These things are outside of our control in a work environment. And the reason I bring this up is not to say that offices are bad, but I think that there are pros and cons to going into an office versus working remotely. And that's really what we're starting to find out as we've kind of been forced into this new normal. So I'm going to talk about something called levels of remote work productivity. And this is not something I developed. This has actually been developed. These levels have been talked about and developed by a fellow by the name of Matt Mullenweg. And Matt Mullenweg is actually one of the co-founders of WordPress. And if you don't know who WordPress is basically powers the internet. About 36% of the web sites on the internet are actually developed on WordPress. Matt's currently the CEO of a company called Automatic. And Automatic has 1,100 distributed workers in 75 countries across the world. So why am I talking about this? Well, one of the things that Matt has done is he's basically kind of started the remote work or distributed work revolution. When he founded WordPress and then moved on to Automatic, he basically decided he didn't want to have a main office. He basically, from the get-go, created a distributed workforce. Now, he calls it a distributed workforce, not a remote workforce. And the reason he uses this terminology is because there is no central office. And so there's nothing to be remote from. They're just distributed workers across the world. And so what I want to talk about just briefly before I get into some more specific recommendations is these different levels that companies find themselves in as they move towards remote work and distributed work. So first level. So this level is the level where a lot of companies found themselves at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. And that is, they've done very little to prepare for remote work. They have email, they have cell phones. And this is kind of where a lot of companies found themselves. People were told to go home, and really the only thing they could do is maybe interact with email and maybe make a few phone calls. But if they really needed anything more than that, they had to go into the office or something else had to be done, because the current setup at most companies really didn't lend itself very well to remote work. And this is where a lot of companies found themselves at the beginning of the pandemic. I know, because our company was receiving tons of calls every single day asking for help. So where companies wanted to move to was level 2. And so in level 2, companies basically try to recreate the office experience at home. Okay, so maybe they'll do things like send a computer home with the employee or send a laptop home with an employee, but they really haven't done anything else to really improve that user's experience. A lot of times they'll use antiquated terms like telework, or they'll ask the employees to be logged in between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. and take a 1-hour lunch. And so what they're really trying to do at this level is recreate whatever was in the office at home. They might play Big Brother and try to install monitoring software. And so it's just, again, not to say this is bad, but this is probably where most companies find themselves today, is they're just trying to recreate what they did in the office at home, okay? And that's not really true remote work productivity. That's not distributed work. That's just telework at this point. Then we move on to level 3. Now at level 3, we really start to take advantage of the medium. We really start to kind of figure out that, hey, we could do things when we work remotely that we can't do when we're in the office. So an example of that might be meetings. So instead of everybody sitting around the table at a meeting, we now can communicate in the meeting with tools like Zoom or GoToMeeting or Google Hangouts. And so now, instead of a meeting being one person talking to you with a PowerPoint presentation, it could be everybody interacting, or maybe everybody is now able to share their screen. And so someone's talking about something and someone else brings up, hey, let me show you what I found. And then they show their screen. Or you collaborate on a document together. So now you're really starting to move in a different way than what you did at the office. You start using tools like Slack or Teams to chat more. So there's a lot less email and a lot more chat and communication that way. Communications actually start to move from being synchronous to what we call asynchronous. Now, traditionally in an office space, everybody has to be there at the same time. Everybody has to communicate at the same time. That's how things get done. But when we move to asynchronous communication, it changes a little bit. Maybe one of your coworkers is a night owl and he ends up working till 2 a.m. and does some really cool things and then sends you some documents. And then in the morning when it's your turn to work, you give him back some feedback. And so that's asynchronous communication. You're not online at the same time, but you're continually moving things forward asynchronously. And so that's where we start to see people when they move to level 3. And hopefully some of your companies are starting to get to this level as we move through this long social distancing period that we find ourselves in right now. Communications become more written. As I said, probably less meetings. So written skills, written communication, that becomes more and more important for companies at this stage. And work starts to be measured not so much on time, but on product, on what you produce. Okay, so this is another big change that has to happen. And this is a challenging thing, especially for people that have been in business for quite a while. It's trying to get their heads around the fact that it's not as important to me anymore that so-and-so shows up at 8 a.m. and leaves at 5. What's really important to me is what are they doing throughout the day? What are they producing? What are they contributing to our company, to our customers, to the bottom line? So that's where we are at level 3. Now, when we move into level 4, we really start to move to a wholly different level. And very few companies find themselves here. And that's when we really move to full asynchronous, okay? We really start taking advantage of a global workforce. So imagine being able to hire people anywhere, find the best talent across the world, and not care about whether or not you have offices in that city, okay? One of the things that starts happening if you move to level 4 is handoffs become incredibly important, okay? There's a story that's told about the 2016 Japanese track team. And they basically, they weren't the fastest runners. It was the 4x100 relay. In fact, their individual times were 2 to 3 seconds less than their competitors. But what they decided to do is they decided to work solely on the handoffs. And so they worked on those handoffs. They got those handoffs to be very smooth. And they ended up taking a silver medal in the 2016 Olympics solely by focusing on handoffs. And so this is a great story to illustrate something that all of our companies probably need to work on, and that is handoffs and transitions. And so when you start communicating more asynchronously, you really have to focus on those handoffs and focus on how do we make sure that projects are seamlessly passed from one person to the next, that baton is passed in a seamless manner, and that people are able to be productive across multiple locations, time zones, and potentially countries. One of the other things that happens in level 4 is meetings become probably a little bit different. One of the challenges with meetings, when you go to a meeting and you're presented with information, generally you're just reacting to what information is being presented to you in that meeting. So one thing you may want to think about doing is sending your employees or your coworkers a document in advance and letting them really think about whether or not, what they want, what they think that needs to happen. And so now when you do meet, people have had time to really think through what's going on, and decisions might take a little longer, but you're generally going to arrive at a better place once you've got everybody's feedback. Again, employees at this stage start to become solely judged by what they produce. Time is probably less relevant at this stage. And again, not all job roles, not all job functions are really going to, when we start getting into level 4, level 5 work, remote work productivity, it doesn't apply to all job roles. If your job is to be help desk for, let's say, incoming calls for Delta Airlines, you can't just work whenever you want. You're going to have to work on the schedule that they ask you to work. And so that doesn't really apply. But if you're a knowledge worker, let's say that you're developing websites or you're writing code, theoretically, you could write code anytime. You could write code anywhere. And so that's where, for knowledge workers, this concept of really being able to be autonomous becomes more applicable. When we get to level 5, we're fully, employees are fully autonomous. Employees might plan their day around exercise or picking the kids up from school. So now they're not set to a schedule anymore. They could pick up and move to some other part of the world and it wouldn't change their job status. They could work any hours they want. If they're night owls, they could work from 11 p.m. till 3 a.m. No one would care. Okay. It's really more, again, about the product that they're producing. And again, not all jobs will lend themselves to this type of remote work, but some jobs do. And some jobs, I think are going to be very desirable for people to have this kind of flexibility. And so this is kind of this level thing. And again, regardless of where your company finds itself, whether you're level 1 and you're still trying to figure it out, or you're level 2 and you're trying to recreate the office experience at home, one of the things that I'm starting to see is I think a lot of companies, even as we start to come out of this social distancing, if we get this under control and we can go back to the office, I think companies are really going to start to reevaluate, do we need to have everyone in the office every day? Or are there certain segments of our team that could work remote? Or are we going to allow more flexibility around remote work? So I'm really interested to see kind of what the result of this is and where we end up as it relates to distributed work and distributed work productivity. All right, let's get into some specific technical recommendations now. So we talked about the levels, and regardless of where your company finds itself along that continuum, you're going to need tools, you're going to need technology to be able to enable people to be productive. And so let's talk about what that technology might look like and kind of talk about some of the pros and cons to each of these technologies. The first thing is VPN access. Okay, so the primary thing people start with typically when they say, hey, we got to work, is VPN. And so you have some main office, you have some main data, main servers, main network that you want people to have access to. And so you'll set up VPN connection from a remote location. So it'll be installed on their laptop or their home workstation. And that's the most common thing I see people do. Now, there are a couple challenges with VPN, and I want to bring that up. First of all, this is the most common, so many companies are doing this. You're not alone if this is what you're doing. One challenge with VPN is not all applications will run across the VPN. Some applications require you to be at the office. The latency that's introduced with VPN is really not sustainable for many applications. VPNs can be difficult to set up. They're not always easy to set up. And so if somebody has been forced to work from home, they may not have VPN access. Some internet providers might block VPN, specifically like if you're staying at a hotel. Sometimes you have to buy a upgraded internet connection to be able to use a VPN. So there are some challenges from a connectivity perspective. VPNs tend to use lots of bandwidth, traditionally more bandwidth than other forms that we're going to talk about here, other connectivity options that we talk about. And they're not legal in all countries. So there are some countries where VPNs are illegal. And so that's another challenge. If you're traveling a lot, if you're, you know, right now, obviously nobody's traveling, but at some point in the future, when we can travel again, hopefully, this is another challenge of VPN connectivity. And they're not necessarily secure. One of the other challenges that you have with VPN is if this remote client gets compromised, let's say that this remote client gets malware or gets some kind of virus on it, then that client can actually infect your main network or your office network as well. And so because your laptop or your desktop becomes a node on the network, it becomes a potential concern when it's compromised. Okay, the next option we have is virtual apps and desktops. And so this is really where my company has spent most of its time over the last 20 years. And that's helping companies take what traditionally was on a physical or local desktop and migrate it to a cloud or data center. And so what happens here is we take all the applications that traditionally sit on your office desktop, and we actually recreate those in a virtual desktop and present that out of the data center. And so now all of those applications that you're used to running locally are now housed in a data center. So the cool thing about once we've done that is now any device can run those applications, because those applications are presented. So the compute's still happening over here in the data center. The data still resides securely in the data center, but you're just seeing a view of it on your local desktop. Now, because you're not really running it on this local desktop, we can do some cool things with that. We can actually start to enable additional devices as well. So now, not only can you run that application on your work laptop, but you can run it on your personal desktop. You could run it on an iPad or a tablet or a phone even. And so now we've really enabled any application to be run on any device virtually. Okay, so that's really the power of virtual desktops. And so what I wanted to do is take a half a second and just demonstrate what this technology looks like. So let me open up a connection to my environment here, and I'll show you what this looks like to the end user, because this is very powerful. So I'm going to go ahead and log in. Now in my environment, I actually have two-factor enabled. We'll talk a little bit more about two-factor later. And so I can basically come into here and I can authenticate myself, and then it shows me the resources that I have at the office. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and log into the office here, and I'm just going to launch this desktop here, and it'll connect me in, and we'll go. Okay, so you see how quick and easy it is for me to access my work environment. And what's going to happen here is it's going to log me into this desktop, and it's basically as if I'm at work. So all the applications that I normally use at work, Excel, Word, they're all there, Outlook, everything I need is sitting there waiting for me to be able to run. And the nice thing is not only are the applications there, but the underlying data is there. So if I want to open up a document that I've been working on at the office, I can actually see my H drive. I can see my Z drive. I see all my office drive letters as well. So that's super powerful. And again, if I want, I can actually have this thing take over my entire screen, or I can move it to just a window, however I want that to show up in my environment. So these are all options that I have within the tool set. So let's see, what else do we want to cover here? So yeah, so let me go ahead and log off of this. And it's super easy. I can just come over here, sign out. Let me jump back into the presentation. Maybe I'll stop doing demo now. That was awesome. That's the first time I've had that happen in forever. We have a joke within our group that the demo guards always get you, which is kind of a way of saying that anytime you try to do a demo, you're really taking your life in your own hands. And so I did a demo, and of course it got me there. So I apologize for that. So yeah, so let me get back into the presentation here. Hopefully everybody is able to join back up. It looks like everybody's coming back in now. So for those that got disconnected, it wasn't on your side. It was me. I accidentally closed the Zoom meeting when I was attempting to close the remote desktop. So I apologize for that. Looks like everybody is finding their way back in. So I'm going to give everybody just 2 seconds to get back in, and then we'll get back at it here. Okay. So that's a virtual desktop. And again, it's normally not that challenging, but because I didn't know how to log out of the virtual desktop without logging out of my local desktop, that's why we got disconnected. So apologize for that. All right, let's dive back into it here. So again, as for those that are coming back in, as we talk about virtual apps and desktops, one of the key capabilities or one of the key advantages to this technology is that users are now enabled to do all of their work remotely without any issue or connectivity problems. Okay, so that's kind of what we have going on there. So another technology that we want to talk about is communication and collaboration. So this is another area where you really need to start thinking about the tools that you're using within your environment. Like, do you have the correct tools within your environment? So let's start talking. First thing is phones. Okay, so many of you have hopefully VoIP solutions, IP-based phone systems that you can take with you on the road. So this is super important that you have those. VoIP solutions allow you to be able to have a physical phone that's basically just connected to the internet. And so that's a great option. But you can also do a soft phone. So a soft phone is a phone that you might install on your laptop or on your or even on your cell phone. So these are very powerful tools that you can use as well. Gmail, Office 365 for email, that's another collaboration tool. I'd try to avoid email servers that are hosted at your location. That's probably not something you'd want to do. Slack, Teams, chat, these kinds of demo or these kinds of collaboration tools are very valuable. Google Chat, Slack, they all have kind of the same capability for you, so that instead of constantly having to send emails back and forth, you can just chat. So we're going to try another demo again. We'll see how I do this time. So what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to open up Teams, and I have a chat going with a user, John Doe, and I'm just going to see if John, looks like John says, good morning, I'm on and ready to work. Let me know if there's anything. So let's just see if he's online right now. And if he is, we're going to work on some documents together. So we'll check to see. It looks like John is online. Hey, and so I'm going to just say, hey, can we, we're going to look at that help desk document. Now, here's the cool thing is instead of us emailing a document back and forth to each other and making revs on it, we've actually shared that document already within our chat. So I'm just going to go ahead and open up this document. And again, you can do the same kind of thing. This isn't something that's specific to Teams. You can do the same kind of thing with Google Hangouts, Google Docs, I should say, with Office 365. And so we can actually both jump into this document and collaborate on it together. And so you see here, I can be typing something here, and at the same time, he can actually be typing something as well. So he might go into the document and want to make modifications as well. And so we both are actually in real time working on this document. And so I'm over here, I'm changing this to TerraLogic. He might be working on another part of the document, and we're both simultaneously interacting with this document. And you can see he can be typing at the same time as well. And so this is kind of the new way that we could work on things jointly versus traditional, email it, wait 2 days, he comes back, and then and we could also, with Teams, we could basically jump on a call right now as well. I could just hit this call button and we could be talking. I'm not going to do that, but you get the idea of how easy it is to kind of interact on documents. So again, that happens to be Teams. You can do the same kind of thing in Google Docs. O365 documents have the same capability. So some great ways that you can really collaborate together on documents and projects. Meetings, again, meetings like this, if you don't end them, GoToMeeting, Zoom, Google Hangouts, these are great tools. You should have some capability to be able to meet as a group. That's definitely something that you'd want to have. File sharing, SaaS solutions. So you might look at a file share. So traditionally in an office environment, you'll have mapped drives or you'll have shared drives that you all interact with. But when you move to a work at home environment, you may want to start looking at tools like ShareFile, Box, Dropbox, OneDrive. These are all capabilities to share files remotely. You might start moving to solutions like Smartsheet, Salesforce.com, HubSpot. So these are all cloud-based CRMs and project tracking tools that you might want to move to. So these are all technologies that really can help enable, again, that remote workforce. So just thoughts on this, and there's pros and cons to each of these. There's not one right answer, unfortunately, for companies, but there's a couple of them. Technical recommendations. One of the things I definitely recommend as we work remote is Challengeresponse authentication. So what do I mean by that? Well, you want to make sure that you have some way of logging in that confirms that you're you. And so that could be as simple as a text message that's sent to your phone. It could be two-factor authentication. It could be, any one of those things. And so one of the things we're starting to see, and I've seen this a lot with companies lately, is because everyone's remote, there's larger attacks on companies right now. More than ever, hackers are trying to attack companies because they know they've got all these remote workers that are in an unfamiliar environment, and they're potentially susceptible to these kinds of phishing attacks. So an example of a phishing attack that we saw recently was an employee got an email that she thought was from her supervisor, and the employee received an email, and the email said, "Hey, can you send me your login and password information? I just want to test something real quick." Well, the employee complied, thinking, okay, well, here you go. Well, it turned out that the email hadn't actually come from that person's supervisor, and in fact, it was a hacker. And so that person was then able to access their systems and actually stayed in their systems for a couple of weeks before it was determined that this had happened. And so you can imagine the damage that something like that causes. Well, with two-factor authentication, that can't happen. And so just to show you again what that looks like, and again, I'll try not to screw this demo up and kick you guys out, but so basically the way this would look is even if someone knew, even if I broadcast my username and password information on this call, I basically would hit, they would hit login, and then they would get prompted with this second factor authentication. They couldn't get past this because they'd actually also need, in this case, my phone to be able to get past here, because my phone is what's receiving these approvals, and then I go ahead and allow it in. So that's really the key concept there is having some form of way of knowing that you're really you, that's beyond just your username and password. Definitely recommend that if you're not leveraging these technologies, you need to be leveraging these technologies. And in our case, we use these technologies across our entire platform. So to access email, you need two-factor authentication. To access virtual apps and desktops, you need two-factor authentication. All the way across the line, you need to have this. And so it's very, very powerful, and definitely something you should look into if you're not currently doing that. Some non-technical recommendations. So again, we're all in this new normal, which is work from home. So what are some other recommendations that we might have? Well, obviously, first of all, stay connected. Stay connected to your teams. Make sure that you have that your teams know where you're at, that you know where they're at, that everyone's happy and healthy. I think there's a lot of anxiety out there right now because of this new work environment that we find ourselves in. There's a lot of schedules and routines that have been disrupted. And so I think staying connected with your teams is super important. Having cadence calls, daily, weekly, just check in with your team, see how they're doing. I think that's a very important thing in these times. Develop a routine. So for you personally, if you're working from home, I'd highly encourage you to, decide on a routine that works for you. you know, and works for the company as far as when you're going to be kind of sitting at your desk and when you're not going to be. One thing that I've noticed is that it's easy to just work all day. Sometimes I'll look up at the clock and it's 7 o'clock at night and I haven't moved. And so you really want to try to schedule yourself breaks, maybe take a walk, maybe just go and sit and eat and, you know, have a lunch. If you normally stop at work for 10, 15 minutes and have a cup of coffee, do the same thing at home. You know, maybe take a break from the computer and, you know, sit in the backyard for a second or something. But it just, if you don't do that, you can really burn yourself out pretty quickly. One of the things that this picture shows is that one thing that's unique about our current experience because of the social distancing is many customers find themselves in a situation where they are not only home, but their spouse is home, their kids are home, everybody's home. And so I think that's another thing that makes it a little bit more challenging. Again, we recommended communication with solutions like Teams, Slack, things like that. Use video features whenever possible. I think it makes it more personal when you show a video. Meetings, you've all seen these types of memes out there. Tell me again why this meeting couldn't have been just an email. So many times meetings are not necessarily productive. And I think we need to talk about why we have meetings and what the purpose of meetings are. They still, I think there is a purpose for meetings, and I think there are still places for meetings, but I think we need to just reevaluate our goals. And so one of the things I like to think about is, what's the agenda for the meeting? What's the purpose of the meeting? So many times meetings are just what we call forcing functions. They basically force people to pay attention. That's really the goal of the meeting, is to force people to pay attention. So if that's really what you're doing, maybe there's another way you could do that. Maybe there's a specific email format that you could use, or something that really could help make sure that people pay attention. Or maybe instead of reviewing the entire content in the meeting, you send an email to people in advance of the meeting, and then let them look at that content, and then they can basically talk about it in the meeting. So the entire meeting becomes much shorter now because you're not having to review the entire content. You're just reviewing any questions that people might have. And again, leveraging collaboration tools in meetings, I think, is super powerful as well. All right, plan your day ahead of time. So it's very easy, I think, and this is true whether you're in the office or at home, but just to kind of react to emails as they come in. And so if you plan your day, if you decide what your priorities are for the day, I think that makes things so much better for everybody. Again, take a walk, exercise. You know, one thing that's nice about being at home is you can do things you normally wouldn't do. Like maybe between meetings, I do 10 push-ups. You know, I really wouldn't feel comfortable doing that at the office, but you can do that at home. And so I think, you know, leverage that at some point, maybe take a quick walk, those kinds of things. One of the recommendations, as I was reading, kind of preparing for this, a lot of people that have worked from home for a long time said, you know, get showered, get dressed every single day. You'll just have a better day if you do that. And so I think that's a good recommendation. Have a dedicated workspace. Now, not all homes will allow for this, but if your home allows for it, definitely create a dedicated workspace that you can use for this. One recommendation I have is to use something called the Pomodoro Timer. And there's been studies that show that you can only keep your focus for so long. And so what the timer does, you can download one on your phone, or you can just use the timer that's built into your phone. They make apps that go on your desktop. But essentially what it does is it breaks your day into these 25-minute segments. And so you decide what you're going to focus on for those 25 minutes. And you basically ignore everything else. You shut down email, you silence your phone, and you decide, okay, I'm going to work on this project for 25 minutes. And what I found, because I've done this, is it really does work. Your mind's able to just focus on that one thing. You don't get distracted. You don't start cycling between projects. You just focus on that one project, and then you take a 5-minute break or a 10-minute break, and then you dive back in and you do it again. So very, very beneficial. If you've never tried it, I would highly recommend it. It's very beneficial. And then when managing people, again, I think we have to kind of modify our expectations. We got to move away from thinking about time, and we have to start thinking about results. And so instead of hey, are you logged in from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m.? Wherever possible, we start asking, are they producing what we need them to produce? Now, it may be, if you run a call center, or if you have a time specific task that needs to be done, maybe the result in that case is, I need you logged in from 8 a.m. till noon. And that's fine if that's the result, but we just really need to make sure that we understand what those results look like, and that the employees understand what those results look like. And then wrapping it up. So again, regardless of where your company sits on this continuum, there's probably things you saw in here that you can improve, okay? Where do you think you should be as a company? Are there things that you could be doing better? Are there tools that you could be using or leveraging in a different way? Those are all things that I kind of want you to walk away from here thinking about, okay? Are you leveraging the correct technologies and tools? I talked about that. Does your team know what's expected of them? Do they know what's being measured, what the results should look like? So those are all important things for you to consider. And then finally, I think there was one more here. Remember, this is a journey, okay? So you're not going to get there immediately. It's not this final destination where it's going to be panacea. This is going to be a constant work in progress. And I think one of the things I want people to take away from this is just think about what you're doing today, what's working, what's not working, and then what you'd like to change. And I think those are really kind of the key things. So that's pretty much it. If anyone has questions, feel free to kind of throw those into the chat. Again, I've added contact information here. So if there's specific things that you're thinking about and you're like, hey, I'd like to do this differently, or I'd like to learn more about virtual apps and desktops, or I'd like to learn more about some of the collaboration tools you talked about, feel free to reach out to us. We're here to help. Again, these are unprecedented times. We're all kind of in this together, and we're all trying to figure it out together, I think. And so hopefully all of you can find the right solutions for your companies. So I apologize for the earlier mishap. Appreciate those that were able to reconnect in. We're gonna fix the recording, I'm sure, and we'll have that link out to you guys at some point here in the near future. So again, thank you so much for your time, and have a great rest of your day. Stay safe.